Hey everyone, we're back.
On? What is going on? That's the question. That's the question everybody wants to know the answer to, right?
Yeah.
What is going on?
And when will my team win?
Which team is that? My team?
Well, everyone has their team, their side.
Yeah.
They want to win. They want
Well,
conclusion.
Yeah. There are many different teams, are there?
There's two basic ones.
What's that?
Conservative, liberal, as the Americans call it.
Mm.
Left, right.
Mm.
Nationalist, globalist. Woke versus trad. Trad cats and the like, Because that is like, what else would drive people to, activism?
Mm-hmm.
We've asked ourselves, what was it that motivated us to, comment and to do, like yourself, you've been doing it 20 years, write articles, try and get the word out. No one's talking about it. I must get the word out.
Because it's going to make all the difference.
That's why people are thinking, someday we will. You shall see. They all shall see the light, and I will be justified.
But if people realise we're in a situation of never the twain shall meet,
exactly,
then they wouldn't be doing that, right?
They can't meet. Yeah.
Well, maybe they would still do it, but they wouldn't be doing it with exactly the same amount of fervour and belief that the people who don't agree with them are simply misinformed or don't understand. And if I can just tell them, but I think that's a process that people are going through, and more people are beginning to realise that, which produces a kind of a polarisation between the two camps, where they simply stop actually talking to each other or stop trying to convince each other and get onto a kind of war footing, because they realise that there's no point. It's not that these people are misinformed. From one side's perspective, or both sides begin to realise that the other side is not simply misinformed, and no amount of facts or details or argumentation or whatever is going to ever convince them. And they realise that the two opposing sides their side and the other side are mutually exclusive. They're not compatible. Basically, there's no, like I said, no possibility for a meeting of minds. And but that doesn't stop people from ranting about it. In fact, sometimes it turns up the volume on the rhetoric and the anger and the vitriol. You know what I mean? You'd think it would kind of make people, okay, listen, there's nothing to achieve here. But then they say, no, there is something to achieve here. We're at war effectively. Beforehand, it was just apparently disagreement. Now we're effectively at war.
Yeah. The first hurdle that people get over is it's worth me investing all my time and energy in this because the upcoming election is there to be fought for and won. And they get over that hurdle when they realize there's no changing politics of it. So they think, well, okay, what's the next thing I can change? Maybe I'll plant some seeds for the future, or maybe, kind of like Steve Bannon, if you're on the right, or his predecessor before he died, Breitbart. They explicitly stated that their thing was not to go after elections, was not to do a George Soros and to literally pay for the candidates who would run for the party to win, but to create, in their case, media, new movements, strategize in ways to shift it downstream from politics, and it would later flip the politics all by itself in other roundabout ways.
It's InfoWars, right?
InfoWars.
Alex Jones is InfoWars.
Alex Jones coined that term, yeah.
We'll 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But
now, then suppose what we've just opened up with talking about here is the terminus of that realization, the ultimate black pill. Maybe that's the term. I'm not sure what the ultimate red pill really is, when you realize that there is no great mass awakening. There are large numbers of people out there who think like you. We seem to fall into types of peoples, so it is worth reminding them, or maybe even waking them up. But even then, you want to be careful with your hubris about what you can and can't do, to help someone else. You're adding a weight, though, to a body of information that does draw like-minded types, over time in aggregate to your side. But you're never going to, you're never talking about a majority. You're never talking about a revolutionary vanguard, who can take our country back, 1776, That can and does happen. But the ones who end up the most committed for that, they've been prepared to kill their way into that position and then kill many millions more to achieve it. They're your revolutionaries. You don't want to be fighting in that corner when that comes, whether you're on the left or the right. That's definitely not your definitely not our type's game in this. Our investment in figuring out the truth, spreading the truth. Yeah, and so but then they say, well, what's the point? What are you doing then? I do this just for this to get it clear in my own head. No, I'm not here to stir the shit per se. I want to get things clear in my own head because it can be confusing. There's mass misinformation generated.
So you learn by speaking,
by collecting it, by paying attention. The study of the daily application, but not an obsession with it. You can only do so much and go so far. You're going to have to. You have questions about it in your head. There's no point in spending the next 3 weeks on Wikipedia and science papers and so on to figure it out definitively. It's an ongoing, slow accumulation. You have to keep the questions open because it will take something to click into place weeks or years from now before you go, oh man, that's
you can learn,
and that's what this means.
You can learn details about specific situations that are interesting to you, right? Yeah. And that are fulfilling or stimulating, whatever, to learn, to figure something out and go, oh, and the minutiae of it. But it's not that you're learning, you're finding the answer to the the big answer, the all and everything answer, because that answer is actually there in a certain sense. And I think a lot of people are going through the process of getting to that answer. They go through the minutiae and the details, and they figure out slowly, bit by bit, by putting little pieces together, and they're forming a picture for themselves, an overall picture of what goes on. And people are at different stages along that process of forming that big picture explanation for themselves. But that big picture explanation ultimately, I think, means that you don't really do anything. You don't engage in any activism. You don't go out in the street protesting or marching or whatever, Doesn't mean you don't talk about it, but you do it from a personal interest perspective rather than from a perspective of thinking that what you're doing is going to change the world or change the other side or bring peace and prosperity to the land type thing, Once you understand enough, you've done enough research and looked at the picture and seen it throughout history in particular, and then leading up to today, you can't but draw that conclusion that there is no one solution to the problems that you see in the planet, however you see them. Yeah. They're there simply, it seems to be the only function they really serve, which is not an insignificant function, is for people to chew over them, for people to get into them, to look at them, to respond to those problems, to respond to social problems, etc., and to, in that way, draw conclusions from them or learn from them. And what they learn is up to them, really. It's up to it's a function of each individual. Yeah. If they're truly honest with people, the activist influencer types will at some point realize, maybe only with hindsight, that topic X, Y, or Z that they were really pushing on and like really, really had a hard on for, a certain number, maybe even years back. Something will click in their brain about it and they'll see it in a new light. And if they're really honest with their audience, they'll go like, I was taken for a ride there. Turns out that was CIA disinfo and or some kind of maybe not so scripted and so clean cut, but simply wrong. It was based on wrong assumptions that are now outdated. And I was putting a very hard and fast stance on this. And I wanted you all to, click and like with me and join the cause and stuff. A truly honest person will come to that realization that I've been used. That, in fact, it's almost a telltale sign when they're most sure about a topic
and they're getting multi-million views about it, and the money's coming in, and they're honest with the money. It's going back out for the cause, maybe to spread awareness or to invest in a new documentary, etc., etc. Not necessarily to run candidates in a campaign or something.
Mm-hmm.
They're truly honest. They'll realize that they've been had by something, by a force that they were swept away by a force that was bigger than them. And whether it was always scripted from the beginning of it, or whether it developed that way when big money came in and co-opted a movement, that is what happens over and over again. I've had that myself, and that has been part of what has helped me to restrain the horses.
Mm-hmm.
When I feel something's come, like when I feel like, no, this one we really have to get the truth out about this. No, that's not correct, and I'm going to correct him. I'm going to start a fight with him about it. You're all wrong, and this is the right thing.
Are there not some things that are objectively true, and that should be spoken, it should be spread, that you can be sure of, basically, that you don't have to doubt?
Sure.
There are some things.
Sure.
And they tend to be very fundamental things, very basic things, rather than complicated geopolitical type analyses, etc., etc., etc. They tend to be fundamental human values that go back a very long time, I think.
Yeah, and you should be able to see when someone's articulating that point of view. It should click or resonate with you, as they say, because you will immediately be able to notice how it can be generally applied, how it fits in other contexts.
Yes, but
it has a universally true essence to it.
You have to get philosophical at the end of the day, because you can say there's some things that are fundamentally true. Let's say, like protecting children, right? That's not, it shouldn't be up for debate, right? But it obviously is up for debate these days. Whether you should protect children, what protecting children is, and what caring for children is. It seems that the water has been extremely, has been muddied to a great extent on that, to the point that there are some people who believe that objectively doing harm to children is in their own best interest, because the children express a desire for harm to be done to them for whatever psychological reasons, whatever. So that's the problem. So when you even go there and you think you found a fundamental truth that's universally true and no one can disagree with it, and you realise that a lot of people are disagreeing about those fundamental things, those fundamental truths as you see them, or that you think everybody should see them as fundamental truths, and you see that people are actually disagreeing with them and contesting them. It's at that point where you realise there is no one answer that's going to fit for everybody. There is no one truth or one truth that everybody's going to agree with. And therefore you would see you can understand a reluctance to actually bother trying to argue for that truth when you see there's a lot of people pushing back against it. You know what I mean? I mean, there's an argument there where you'd say that some people, there's manipulation going on. If you find a fundamental truth like, let's say, protecting children, you see other people who are arguing for actually harming children, and you realise there are some people out there who are well-intentioned who might get taken in by the argument for harming children. Then it's important for you to be one of the voices saying, no, don't harm children.
They would never acknowledge that they're harming children, though. They think they're improving them.
Of course, but there are other people in the middle. The only reason to argue for certain values or certain principles at this point is when you posit that there's a group of people in the middle who are undecided or who can be influenced, and you have an interest in trying to prevent them from being manipulated and pulled to the dark side, let's say. You know what I mean? That, and I think
most, but it should primarily be to remind yourself that where you stand on it.
Yeah.
Saving others. Okay. Well, you're helping sending. You may be doing some good, but you're sending out a signal, and you're keeping a counterpoint, a counter lightning rod, a point of attraction away from the message from central authority.
Yeah.
And that's good to keep that going. And there's lots of people doing that, and they serve that great function. But, to win we may actually be seeing the unveiling. If this is the apocalypse, the time of the unveiling, this is the unveiling of an eternal battle. The good side, if they're true to what the ancient equivalents of their side apparently articulated, it can't ever be won. It's not there to be won. It's an eternal struggle.
Yeah, it just goes round and round, happens all the time.
But that doesn't mean you stop and you be quiet or you give up and you roll over to the other side.
No,
the strength of your activism is more to keep yourself from being swayed by it, and by articulating it, you're going to help others do the same thing.
Yeah,
that's it. You know what I mean? It's a lot less of a,
I suppose, so the one thing you pull back from, you draw
revolutionary.
Yeah, you draw a line at the idea of defeating the other side, because you recognise that that other side, this forces of, from your perspective, the forces of darkness, let's say, cannot be defeated. They will always exist and always come back, whatever. And it's just about aligning yourself with one side or the other, choosing based on your nature to align yourself and kind of solidify your orientation to one side or the other, based on your choice.
Yeah. And sometimes things pop up that is not clear either what happened or where the values are in what is happening through
whether it's good or bad.
And that we should talk, we talk it out amongst ourselves with our mates, and then we come on here and we talk about it some more, and it only takes form maybe after a week. And you see it happening across the whole infosphere online. People are unsure, that they take one side initially and then they switch.
Yeah.
So sometimes there are genuine curveballs, but for the most part, you can tell it straight away. When somebody's taking a stance on the COVID or Ukraine war or climate, we all do that sort of quick calculus and we go, they probably have the same similar opposite stance to me on all the other issues as well. So sometimes not though.
No, sometimes there's sometimes it's complicated. It gets very murky, obviously, in that when you have forces of quote unquote good and evil operating from in the ether or whatever, or in human consciousness and human society, and when it gets transduced down into and through a human being and how they express it, it can become very complicated and very, very messy. You know what I mean? Which makes it even more difficult to call it one way or another. You often can't call it one way or another. An example is, for example, let me show you this. It kind of came up. I put up a few pictures, and it's a good example of what we're talking about. Actually, it was in Germany. It was a march of certain people, as you'll see in Germany. Just throw this up, Scotty, and just some pictures of the actual march. I'll just leave these here. These are Ukrainians in Germany. Just click on each picture there. I can get. So the war is not over, and then the next one. Those are a couple of LGBTQ people who had been fighting for the existence of Ukraine, and we need them in NATO. And then the next one is Be Pride, Be Like Ukraine. And then the last one is Donbass is gay. So, so I'm like, this is okay. So this is an example.
Depending on your nature, you see what you want to see.
Well, right. I mean, obviously, you can see what's going on there. How, I don't know. Can you see what's going on there? What is going on? Why are a bunch of, peace-loving LGBTQ people, promoting war in Ukraine, or supporting conflict in Ukraine and tying it in with their own ideology of LGBTQ, et cetera, right? But this then is from this is from the same march. It was a anti-fascist, feminist, LGBTQ.
So it wasn't the pride thing per se.
Well, yeah, as well. It was all mixed in there. It was weird. But just have a listen to this.
Oh yeah, rings a bell.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So, Palestinian flags and a load of pride flags and rainbow flags, etc.
That's an appropriate protest against actual toxic masculinity, or one expression of it, arguably. Namely, Israel's ultranationalism having real world oppression against a minority.
Yeah.
for religious and ethnic reasons. That's an actual expression of the discrimination and the diversity, equity, inclusion that all their lingo talks about. Well, there's
Oppressed people everywhere.
that is correct.
It's all oppressed people.
But there's layers to it. You notice they're speaking in English.
Mhm.
Why?
Oh, because
Why not German?
I don't know. Maybe because
And that
it's
talks
international.
to the globalization process. That talks to the Americanization of Europe, the American occupation and control of Europe. Arguably, that's a bit of a rough term to use because they would all be like, "What are you talking about?" And yet they would say to me, "What are you talking about?" in English, but the
Right.
German.
Yeah.
You know, so it's textured and layered, and sometimes, well, I suppose if I'm being really harsh with them, I would say, well, twice a day a broken clock. You know,
Yeah.
can be right.
Yeah.
Can I have your one of your 2 lighters? Mine is out of gas. I'm out of juice here. Need more oil.
Anyway.
Need more oil. Well, do you want to start with Ukraine and all related issues? I have a question for you. We discussed this months ago. I mean, there were Russian troop movements into Belarus, and oh my God, are they going to? Colonel
Right.
McGregor's like they're going to swoop down and pinch the
Prigozhin.
movement.
Or, sorry, Wagner.
That was last year. Since then, we've had the Wagner LARP, mutiny, coup, and Wagnerites have apparently stationed in.
Yeah. It's
In
kind of
Belarus.
interesting. It ties in, obviously, with what.
If I can just.
Yeah.
The news item today is that Putin is meeting Lukashenko, and Lukashenko's dropping a few hints about this,
Yeah.
talking
Like what?
about the Wagnerites. He says, "Yeah, I've been talking to some of them, and they're pretty worked up. They're pissed off. They want to go over the border into Poland
They wanna
and
have-
settle some scores with some guys they met in Bakhmut."
Yeah.
He's just dropping that out there in front of the press, and Putin didn't say anything responsive. But
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's they want to go on an excursion to the west. Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting because, I mean, that smacks of both, Putin and Lukashenko kind of like coyly trolling in a certain sense, but using the whole, notoriety of Wagner, but also the fact that Wagner might be kind of rogue in a certain sense, you know what I mean? Which is obviously typified by Prigozhin's LARP. LARP up to Moscow, or halfway to Moscow, or not even halfway to Moscow, a few weeks ago, when the coup, supposedly the coup. That obviously bolsters the idea that Wagner is this kind of potentially rogue element of the, not even really of the Russian military, a private military company in Russia that's loyal to Russia, and they're off the leash, right? I mean, they just supposedly tried to have a coup, tried to coup Moscow, coup the Kremlin, and were only held back by, Putin's sober mind and sober actions, and now they're in Belarus, yeah, you never know what they do. They're worked up, and they want to go to go to Poland for a holiday. But it also is in the context of the claims, and Putin himself said it, that the Poles were planning to, or had some idea of invading Western Ukraine, or trying to take. It's been a claim made for quite a long time that the Poles had designs on Western Ukraine. And
yeah,
go ahead.
You carry on. Put that one up. There was a formal report issued by Naryshkin, the head of Russia's FSB, I think. And then Putin made commentary on that in his virtual speech to the Russian Security Council, which was aired. That's the reason it became a topic at all.
So Poland considering sending troops to Western Ukraine, Russian foreign. Yeah.
And what do you mean by that now? The not FSB, SVR head believes that Warsaw is coming to realize that the defeat of Ukraine is a matter of time, in referring to the front line of the south of Ukraine. And that quote here from him, Naryshkin says, the Polish leadership is intensifying the mindset. So they're talking abstractions, but maybe they've seen things on the ground to support it, to introduce control in the western territories of Ukraine by deploying their troops there. Not the first time the Russians said, I've run this up the flagpole. There's no concrete. Intensifying the mindset isn't the same as, we're seeing actual buildup of Russian Polish forces. Maybe there are, though, on the borders there, either with Belarus or Western Ukraine.
Yeah.
But there was obviously all sorts of
Yeah.
activity there because of them. That's where the mercenaries
Right, it's
come in.
presented as a historical desire on the part of the Poles to grab a piece of, it was formerly part of Poland, part of Western Ukraine. But that would obviously be supported. They wouldn't be doing that without the blessing of the Americans. The Americans would be happy for. I mean, that would be part of the overall US-led strategy in Ukraine, which is. But what it points to for me is that the conflict in Ukraine is not going very well for the Western powers and for the Ukrainian military in particular. And it's coming to the point. This obviously isn't happening right now, but it's the fact that it's being mooted is
The next
it
crossroads.
suggests that the conflict may be coming to a denouement, let's say, and the plan that they have on the books, the US has on the books, is that Poland/NATO would invade Western Ukraine and take a part of it in order to seize the conflict. Basically, Russia would, in a certain sense, quote unquote, win, but would be prevented from getting much of Western Ukraine. They would, the conflict would be frozen, let's say, along the river, the Dnieper River, down the middle, more or less. Russia would control that side, the right-hand side, let's say, looking from the bottom up, the eastern side of Ukraine, and the west then would control the western side, and that would be it. And I mean, that's happened many, many times in different conflicts throughout the ages, That's very, very often the conclusion to these kind of great power conflicts.
A DMZ with a
North
a
South Korea,
frozen line.
The Cold War, East West, and many others where there's just an agreement made effectively.
But but that's one step ahead. The first step is that this has to happen. That NATO/Polish forces formally move into the West.
And the suggestion here is that Russia isn't inclined to go along with that, basically, and they're using Wagner as a threat to Poland, So
Right.
Lukashenko and Putin talking about, or Lukashenko saying to Putin, hey, those right Wagner guys, they're kind of a bit of a problem,
He said, how do I say, they're kind of in a bad mood.
Yeah, they're pissed off and they want to go. And the implication.
I'm trying to keep a leash on
We
them.
can't really do much about them. Look what they did a couple of weeks ago. They took off to try and have a coup in Moscow, and so they're off the leash, basically, these guys, and you don't want to piss them off, So, and that's all designed to try and stay, to discourage Poland from taking any action on Western Ukraine, because I think the implication would be that Wagner would either, move down to meet any Polish/NATO troops coming into Western Ukraine across the Polish border, or even worse, they would just go straight from Belarus into Poland and attack Poland to give Poland like in the same way you've got Ukrainian troops incursions into Russia, you could have a Wagner incursion across the Belarus border into Poland.
Uh-huh.
That gives the Poles a serious problem. You know what I mean? They take a bunch of towns, whatever, near the border, and you don't want to go there. I mean,
Putin, I thought it was ominous. I sent it to you, Scott. It's a tweet, but it's translated comments of his comments on this issue yesterday to the Russian Federal Security Council, whatever it's called. If Polish units enter, for example, the Lvov or other territories of Ukraine, that's the western part, they will remain there, and they will stay there forever. This will be nothing new. Let me remind you, and he goes on to give a history of Poland. I say it's ominous because it's in one sense, it's just a benign history of Poland, a recap of the last century. But the last time I remember him giving this kind of history rundown was on the eve of the denazification launch into Ukraine, So,
but I think more. Yeah,
he pissed off Poland something fierce. They recall their ambassador, especially for the last paragraph. If you scroll down, it was thanks to the Soviet Union after World War II, thanks to Stalin's position, that Poland gained significant lands in the west, lands of what was then Germany. That's exactly right. The western territories of present-day Poland are Stalin's gift to the Poles. Talk about it.
Yeah, along with communism, right? Along with
everything.
60 years, 50 years of communism.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, the fact that he talks in those terms quite a lot in terms of historical context, like over the past 100 years, and the Cold War and the kind of like First and Second World War, he obviously sees this in the same context. This is just a continuation of the last, an unbroken, effectively, continuation of a kind of global geopolitical games, particularly in Europe and Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
And with the involvement of the US that have really unbroken since 1914. That began with the First World War, at least, and
in which Poland gets chewed up every time.
Yeah.
That's probably his objective point. Yeah. If you remove any hint of it being a veiled threat on Russia's part, he's stating an objective historical fact. Poland routinely gets chewed up.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, in those events throughout the 20th century, over the past 100 years, the First World War, the Second World War, then the Cold War, now the new Cold War, which is culminated in this conflict. most of that time, all of the events and the results of the wars were to America's favour, to the West's favour. That's why the West became the best, and the golden billion and all that kind of stuff. Russia has entered into this new stage in it with a different agenda, with an agenda to basically undo that, as the Russians and a lot of other people in the world see it, as that injustice or the imbalance in global power as a result of American dominance over the past 100 years. So it's a continuation of the same kind of geopolitical games and conflicts and wars, but this time with a vision to changing the whole dynamic.
It's ideological, but it's no longer, now it's backed by resources.
Exactly.
The first Cold War was ideological almost for its own sake. Communism versus capitalism.
Well, the thing is, you had resources coming online throughout that entire period of time, in a changing world, and the development of technology and all that kind of stuff. And now the situation is such that it's not as easy for the West to dominate and win and dictate terms in a similar kind of conflict today as it was, like, let's say, 60 years or 70 years or 80 years ago. That's at least that's the plan. That's the Putin plan, so people should see it in that context, that it's not, it's part of a continuum,
Yeah.
Nobody alive today was probably around for the First or Second World Wars, or really had any impact on it. Most people didn't even really have any understanding, or didn't have much didn't experience much of an impact from the Cold War, even, So a lot of people alive today, of age today, who are commenting on it and looking at it and stuff, they're a bit kind of shocked by it, but they don't seem to understand that this really is just it's a continuum.
Yeah.
It's unbroken from more than 100 years ago. You have to see it in that context, because that's the way the people who are actually fighting this, engaged in this conflict and fighting this geopolitical war, that's the way they see it. So why do you want to remain the little person who's kind of like going, oh, what's going on? I don't understand. Or do you want to understand it the way the people who are actually managing it understand it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. He's directly involved in managing it, but there was interesting commentary from the ex-CEO of Google, Schmidt. What's his name, Scotty?
Eric Schmidt, I believe.
Eric Schmidt. Did you see that one? He's on CNN with Fareed Zakaria. I have it all here. Maybe we'll play it. This isn't anything new to anyone who's paying attention to the war, but it's the first time I think I've seen on CNN a kind of objective overview of how it's playing out. And it's interesting that the CNN host, Fareed, is he just can't wrap his head around it. He's like, this is like a First World War. Why? He doesn't understand. And the guy explains to him, it's because it's two near competitors fighting. America's not fought such a war since at least World War II. The whole thing's worth listening. I'll ask you to stop maybe here and then. I'll add a comment.
What does the battlefield look like? Who has the advantage?
The thing that's shocking is how big this war is. It's 1,000 kilometers long,
And since 2014, the Russian side has dug themselves in this horrific way. So if you were a Ukrainian...
Pause there. He's probably conflating. I don't think he's just trying to get it wrong. 2014, that's not true. That 1,000-kilometer line, they've been dug in since November. That's what's impressive. That's all the more impressive.
Why is digging yourself in horrific? You said they dug themselves in this horrific way.
Because it's absolutely grinding up everything the Ukrainians and NATO throw at it.
So the act of digging yourself in isn't necessarily horrific. It's whenever...
It's the result of...
It's when you try and throw yourself against it. That's what's horrific. So it's the Ukrainians' fault rather than the Russians digging in that's horrific.
Yes.
Right. Just to truthify what he said there.
The Russian Ministry of Defense said this week that since this began on the first week of June, 26,000 Ukrainians are dead. You multiply that by 4 to get the injured. That's horrific. It is horrific in itself. But I want to interject so early because he's probably conflating two things. On the one hand, he's probably correct that the Russian military and in its entire industry, perhaps, has been gearing itself up for this since 2014. But what he's about to describe is all the more impressive because that 1,000-kilometer defensive line, or lines plural, has only been established like lightning in the last 6 months. So carry on.
Ukrainian soldier with your commander saying go across this 5-kilometer disputed area, you'd have to get through the tanks, the mines, the machine guns, their drones. You get to the other side, you do your killing, and then the back part of Russia kills you. It's an insurmountable task.
I was stunned to read how many shells the Russians are using.
60,000 a day. The world production in the West can accommodate about 5,000 a day. I guess the Russians have been building artillery for about 50 years, and they have an infinite supply. 60,000
a day. Now, I mean, my math, you're talking about something like 20 million a year. I mean,
So
this is crazy.
Today, this is a World War I artillery war with people dug in. How incredible, 100 years later, we haven't come up with another way. If you're
Pause it there.
That's what I said, 100 years later.
That makes it sound, the way he's saying it, that we, in this case the Russians, haven't been able to improve on that. No, mister. This is what happens when you get two near-peer competitors. And Ukraine isn't really a near-peer competitor. It only is to the extent that it has 50 NATO countries supplying it with everything. In that respect, this is a fairly equal match overall, right? So that's kind of it's misinforming unintentionally readers listeners as to why it's a World War I like environment. It's because since then, certainly since World War II, there hasn't been a reasonably fair clash. Korean War was arguably because the Chinese threw numbers at it, but the US, mainly US NATO forces in that war they had air power.
What kind of war? What war does he want to see in a new technological age, in a modern technological age? What difference does he want to see rather than artillery?
Well, the only one the American is familiar with is you bomb the crap out of the country and then send tanks in, and you just roll over.
But that's still
there is relatively little engagement.
They did that in World War II as well, and World War I. They had planes, they bombed places, and then they sent in tanks and troops. So,
but
I'm just
the
wondering
Germans had also planes,
yeah,
and means to shoot some of the airplanes down.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They would have to take bridgeheads.
But I'm just wondering. He said it's amazing that we're still fighting this kind of war. What war would he want? What war does he expect to see now that we're so modern and technological? How would it be different? It's not. He says it's an artillery war, just like World War I or World War II. What should it be like? He's so amazed that we're using artillery. What should we be using instead in this? What should anybody be? Two major powers, the West involved. How should they be conducting the war differently?
Well, if
take away artillery, what are you left with? Should all be just drones, maybe? Robots?
In what the US has done for 50 plus years is that it has basically destroyed the enemy's army first, almost completely, and then gone in. You know, there is no. When it went into Serbia, it built its largest overseas base at all, Camp Bondsteel,
Kosovo,
because it was safe to do so. there was no organized response to it.
So what he's saying is, like, what he's lamenting there is that there's any resistance to America.
What he's saying is we're used to turkey shoots, and it's shocking to see an actual war between
So they
two
think
near
a modern
competitors.
war in the 21st century, a modern war waged by America, should be, over the horizon kind of strikes, no direct engagement, no American planes shot down, no need for artillery because you have dominance over the airspace.
That's literally what they'll go on to explain, that's how their military-industrial complex is
Was set
organized.
up,
Now,
yeah.
they don't make this stuff anymore.
Yeah,
And
so you take away. So the main point there is you take away air superiority. You take away America's ability to dominate the air, and you're back to World War I artillery battles.
basically,
Well, and it's only planes.
the
so
only
it's not really-
addition is drones, which
Yeah.
they'll talk about in a
it's being
second.
used, yeah.
Yeah. Carry on.
Ukrainians trying to break through. You want to get to the Sea of Azov, you have to break through this initial line below Zaporizhzhia, for example, and then you have to make a corridor. Well, as you go through your corridor, they're bombing you as well.
And now the bombing is precision bombing, right? Because
Exactly.
you can target more accurately.
And the American doctrine is that you would always do such infantry moves with air power, which the Ukrainians don't have.
there you
And
go.
the air power comes in, cleans the path, and then the American gets the other side running back, and then they start to win. We, meaning the Ukrainians, the US, the West, need a solution to get them moving.
So that gets us to drones. They are already using an extraordinary number of drones, the Ukrainians. How many drones are they using a week or a month?
They're on track to using a couple 100,000 drones in a year. Most drones only survive 1 or 2 flights before they fail or they're blocked. I was shocked at how good the Russians were at electronic warfare and jamming. Basically, everything you send into this battlefield, which is quite narrow, by the way, the rest of the country is fine, I suspect, on both sides. They jam everything. GPS is jammed, but also communications is jammed. So normal drones don't work. So the Ukrainians have taken cheap drones and added additional antennas. One of the things that I learned was something called a kamikaze drone, which is a $400 Chinese drone that carries a small payload that moves so fast you can't shoot it down. I had thought that that was the innovation of the war. 2 generals yesterday told me that I'm wrong, and that what they really need are cruise missile drones, which can go really far and carry with wings and can carry more payloads. I don't think the Ukrainian drone strategy is completely formed, but they're building a completely new theory of war.
And this is where we get to the solution. For you, the only way the Ukrainians can break through these lines is with massive numbers of drones.
Massive number of drones or massive number of human casualties on both sides. The beauty of the drone is it can take out the other side's military target without collateral damage, right? We are very concerned about the propagation of this war against other countries, but I'm very concerned about its effect on civilians, both the Russians and the Ukrainians. The important thing about a drone is it's a very, very targeted solution. It's very inexpensive. I think the goal that we should have for Ukraine is to establish the principle that there will never be another land war where you can invade successfully. That respecting the land, the sovereignty of the land, is important. If you're mad at them, that's fine. You can negotiate, you can put pressure, but you can't send artillery and flatten cities, which is what the Russians have been doing.
How do you get to the solution of? I mean, can the Ukrainians produce hundreds of thousands of drones?
They have the money and they have the talent. They haven't figured out how to build all the factories yet, and they have to be built in Ukraine for many, many reasons.
And they keep getting blown
So
up.
Okay.
what I know is there are
We'll
about
leave it
60
there
companies.
because 60's talk about companies and innovation. He gets on his Google CEO speak there that naturally he would be advertising as the public-private partnership solution to winning the war against Russia. But already in just some of the basic facts in his description, in his objective description of what is, you see that it cannot be won. And maybe in the future he's right. This has maybe changed the future of warfare, where drones are far more important, and who has the better integrated systems to dominate the skies, to effectively jam the opponent's drones while yours succeed. Well, just on that score alone, and this maybe wasn't known by the Russians at the outset, but it is clear now. Look at the videos all day, every week of these Lancet drones. They're cheap. They can't be detected using classical systems because they don't have any heat signature. They're propeller drones, and they're coming in. They're wasting Bradley tanks, Challenger tanks, etc. all day, every day.
That's because the Ukrainians don't have any EW, electronic warfare,
or they have insufficient ones. They have radars. You see some Lances coming in, and they're hitting these big antennas. You know, they are hitting their EW system. So the Russians are better at it.
They're better at it, and they don't have the ability to kind of transport them to the required locations. You know,
so Schmidt cites. It's actually an estimate. Fareed obviously has had his head in the sand for months because the 60,000 figure was first cited last fall, and then it fell down. Maybe it's back up in that ballpark now, the 60,000 shells fired daily by Russia. Well, maybe let's call that the upper estimate of what they do fire daily. And they haven't strictly used that amount daily. But still, that volume is... Fareed is right to be shocked. That volume is so off the charts to anything that the American war machine is used to. Here's a Newsweek article. It's a recent article. It's basically a summary of the current and future estimates of American production of the standard shell that's used as the 155 millimeter artillery shell. Okay, so if you do a word search simply for 2028, in this paragraph, it actually refers back to a decision made in March this year. In March, U.S. Army Undersecretary Gabe Camarillo announced that the Army will boost production of 155 millimeter artillery shells more than sixfold to 85,000 a month by fiscal year 2028. 85,000 a month by we're not even in 2024. A month, but the Russians are firing 60,000 per day. So, yes, war is a racket, as you said, but this is a racket they'll get rich from while they can, but they cannot win. I don't know why is that. I presume it's because Russian industry is so tooled for this, and like he says, they've been, quote, dug in since 2014, and they have a massive stockpile of stuff, and they gamed this to being what it has ended up being, 1,000-kilometer long artillery battle. That for now, remember, Fareed said to him, well, how can we win this? And Schmidt's answer was, well, there's one of two strategies. You either throw people at it, which is what's been done today, human casualties, or drones. And he says, we're going to innovate, and Ukraine will get better, and the systems will be integrated, and they'll catch up with the Russians. I don't think so, dude. It's looking like technologically you're losing, and also in mass, in the old school ability to manufacture volume. So they're losing both technologically and in sheer quantity.
That doesn't matter.
The US does not have the industrial capacity. It may by 2028 have enough to fire a tenth.
Yeah, but that's...
But then it's over. It's not serious. You see, so you're right. War is a racket. The US will, the military-industrial complex will, the government will issue the demands, like back in March, we need this much. And they'll go, okay, well, we're going to add to our factory plants. We'll do what we can. But you would have to basically reorganize the United States' entire industrial base to even match what the Russians are firing. So it's an amazing set of stats, but it shows you, okay, it's an old school artillery war, but it's over. So here we have like General McGregor and Scott Ritter's insistence for months now, look, this is over, all over by the crying, and people still say to them, but I don't know, I see it's still going on. But only because you're still throwing bodies at it.
Yeah, why are they doing that?
To keep the racket going. It's good for the West.
Money.
That's
I mean, an example.
But it's your detachment from the reality of the narrative-wise.
But the narrative is to keep people going, to throw themselves at to keep people in the West supportive of Ukrainian soldiers throwing themselves into a meat grinder, and dying for no reason other than the enrichment of people, Western oligarchs, basically Western elites. So that's why they keep pushing out that narrative. But from their own personal perspective, these elites are doing it simply because they're making a lot of money. It's good for the economy and it's good for them financially and personally. The same with the whole grain deal. I mean, we're talking more about Ukraine, what's been going on in Ukraine this week. Like, I mean, the past few nights, Russia has been, attacking Odessa with missiles and this came immediately after the collapse, the failure of the grain deal. It hadn't really been working for about a month now anyway.
But which was preceded by another attack on Kerch Bridge.
Right, so the Kerch on the Crimea Bridge, the attack, and that was, they used that as a pretext to say, listen, okay, we're officially getting out of the grain deal. And
which you immediately called. I saw your tweet. I was away, but your tweet popped up. As soon as it happened, you're like, I know what's going to happen next. Let's have a look. Now, Kerch Bridge is attacked by sea-based drones. Presumably, then they were sent out from around Odessa. Crimea from Odessa area. You tweeted the day of it, section of one of the lanes of the Crimean Bridge damaged. Timing is interesting given that the Black Sea grain deal was set to expire today, Monday. That's Monday last week, unless renewed by Russia. The attack on the bridge seems designed to ensure that Russia does not renew this deal, putting pressure on global food prices.
Mm-hmm.
My only quibble with that is, did Russia even need this provocation to not renew it, or were they not going to renew it anyway?
It hadn't been in operation, hadn't been operating. It hadn't been grain shipments allowed by Russia through the Black Sea, but it's more than just grain. It's like they basically, since the attack on the bridge, they have officially cancelled the grain deal, and also they basically blockaded Russian or Ukrainian ports, including Odessa, of what's left of Russia's Ukraine's Black Sea coast. There's no more ships of any kind going in and out of Ukrainian ships of any kind going in and out of Ukrainian ports. And then also they have specifically attacked attacked Odessa, and not just grain silos and stuff, but other military warehouses and buildings, locations where a lot of that kind of stuff for attacking Russia via the sea were being prepared.
So
it's
just to
interesting.
clarify, even by last week, de facto grain was not being shipped out from the part of the Black Sea Ukraine had access to. It had already stopped de facto.
Yeah.
Okay.
But a good explainer actually is from there was a UN Security Council meeting recently, and Russia at the UN Security Council. We'll just it's not too long. We'll just read this. So this is the guy, the Russian ambassador in the UN, saying, most of you expressed in one way or another disappointment at the termination of the so-called grain deal that provided for exports of Ukrainian grain to global markets. I have a question for you. What did you expect? From the very start, we've been drawing everyone's attention to the fact that the initiative did not meet the initially proclaimed goal and was gaining a well-defined commercial nature. In fact, from the very beginning, developed countries had taken the lead among those buying food from Ukraine. However, no steps were taken to remedy this end. What he's saying there basically is that it had been turned into just a money-making scheme by Western countries and Western governments to, rather than feed the poor people in Africa or elsewhere in the world, most of the grain was actually being shipped to, ending up in Europe, being bought at a very cheap price, and then being added into the food supply and sold on at a profit, basically sold on to consumers in Europe at a profit. So he said no steps were taken to remedy this trend, because the whole idea of the grain deal was that it was, officially the humanitarian West was saying we need this grain too, and they even say that afterwards now that it's been cancelled. What about the poor people in Africa?
Yeah.
They were never getting any of it, basically hardly any of it.
Yeah.
So during the Black Sea Initiative, a total of 38.2 million tons of cargo was exported, of which more than 70% went to high and upper middle income countries, including the European Union. The poorest states, notably Ethiopia, Yemen, Afghanistan, Sudan and Somalia, accounted for less than 3%.
And notice that that's the countries that are hemorrhaging migrants who end up in Europe.
Right. And the next part is quite interesting as well and instructive in terms of the whole idea of that war. Everything around this war is a racket. Such geography and commercialization of an initially humanitarian initiative is easily explained by the fact that the owners of a significant part of Ukrainian arable land, more than 17 million hectares, are Western corporations Cargill, DuPont and Monsanto. They bought up Ukrainian land after Kiev lifted a 20-year moratorium on its sale at the request of the IMF and became the main beneficiaries of Ukrainian grain exports. On the other hand, the Europeans who buy Ukrainian food at dumping prices, at low prices, then process it at home and resell as ready-to-consume goods with high added value. In other words, they earn twice. What does this have to do with the task of getting food delivered to the poorest countries, about which we have heard again today? Now, all of that is totally separate from part of the actual grain deal, which was that Russia would allow Ukrainian grain to be shipped out of Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea, as long as sanctions were lifted on Russian exports of fertilizer, for one, which obviously is part of ensuring there's enough food supply in the world. You need to have the fertilizer to grow the crop. So this was obviously, if you guys are so concerned about shipping grain out of Ukraine to poor countries around the world, surely you should be happy to at least lift the sanctions on Russian fertilizer, which is the biggest producer of fertilizer in the world.
Between
one
them
of the biggest,
and Belarus, yeah.
Surely they should have no problem with doing that, because that's instrumental in making sure that the world can continue, especially poor countries, can continue to grow crops and feed themselves. So if your whole thing is humanitarianism, you should have no problem with the details of this deal that you supposedly agreed to, which was we allow grain to be exported from Ukraine, you allow you should lift sanctions on us exporting Russian fertilizer. But they never did. They never lifted the sanctions on Russian fertilizer. So they reneged on their part of the deal. So the deal was defunct quite a long time ago already, because it became very clear to Russia that the West was not going to lift these sanctions. Yeah. So but interestingly, even in this, the worst case scenario in a certain sense, for the West, it's not a worst case scenario, since you have these major Western, American really, corporations who own large tracts of fertile land in Ukraine, who are growing these crops. You'd think that they have a vested interest in that grain that they basically own. A lot of that grain that they own being shipped out so they can make the money on it, right? And now they can't. But the grain can still be, well, for one, the grain will still be shipped, not necessarily via ports anymore, Odessa or other ports, but it can still be shipped overland by trains, kind of northwards and westwards through Ukraine. And not only that, but these countries also own land in other countries. They have a vested interest. They have, one of their products is grains. They own land not just in Ukraine. They bought up a lot of land in Ukraine, but they have a lot of land in other countries. They grow a lot of other grain in other countries. So this attack on, or this kind of mothballing of the grain deal means that, when it happened, you read that wheat prices soar.
Yeah.
Who benefits?
Cargill,
DuPont and Monsanto. Anyway, no matter what happens, they gain anyway. The house
always wins.
Right? Yeah. So the most Russia could do was actually to kind of to make them suffer a little bit, was to actually destroy the actual grain in the ports of Odessa, so that at least they're attacking,
target grain stores.
Yes, because
and weapons.
That's Cargill, DuPont and Monsanto. That's basically, the American government's or the CIA's grain that they're making money from. And the money that they're making from that is ensuring the continued supply of weapons to Ukraine. It's a kind of quid pro quo. It's like Ukraine has no more money left. What have you got? Well, you've got land. Okay, give us the land. We'll buy it, quote unquote, from you in exchange for us giving you weapons. And we'll and the grain that you have, the grain that's produced on that land that we now own, that you've kind of traded with us, we'll make money on that in exchange for continuing to give you weapons. So if Russia, it's totally rational for Russia to try and destroy that grain in order to reduce the profits that these Western corporations are getting from that grain, so that they're less likely to, ideally, I mean, it's not going to have any immediate dramatic effect, but it reduces their income through which they are continuing to then supply weapons to Ukraine.
Right.
So basically it's an attack on the Ukrainian economy, which is now a proxy economy run effectively. It's effectively the Western economies, but
the whole thing
Western
is-
economies can continue to finance this war for free, right? They obviously have been taking control of and taking ownership of Ukrainian resources of all different types. So all of those resources, among which is grain, are all legitimate military targets, because
They're all geared
the
towards
economics that
weapons.
allow they're translated into weapons.
Right. Interesting. And so gradually they end up militarizing the whole economy, and then Russia's inevitably faced with increasing expansion of what exactly it means to demilitarize said country.
Yeah.
And what is still strictly a civilian, or what is in fact a military target. They begins to grow and grow. And maybe they try
You
to
have to-
restrain themselves, but the target range becomes much broader. And so they did actually hit grain silos in Odessa this week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In addition to weapons, though.
Yeah.
They didn't exclusively target that.
And that grain was being used to fuel the war in Ukraine, to fuel Ukraine's military capability. Ukraine says that's totally justified, and Russia says, well, yeah, then it's totally justified for us to attack it.
Right.
Yeah, Ukraine has no real functioning economy. I mean, it's getting close to the point where Ukraine's going to have some serious economic problems, and they're going to be just left. The West will just walk away. Once Ukraine can no longer service its debt in the form of weapons, the West will lose interest in Ukraine. And it'll just become a kind of hobbled proxy state owned by Western corporations, you know.
Yeah. Do you think
The vultures, basically.
the prediction by McGregor that Russia will take Odessa might come true here? I mean, if there's now a no-go zone in the sea between the point where that tip of Ukraine meets Romania and Crimea, they've been blitzing Odessa port facilities all week long. The next natural step to preventing for permanently Ukrainian access to the Black Sea would be to expand that line all the way to Moldova.
Yeah, well, they'd have to be sure that they had degraded Ukrainian military capability in and around Odessa before they would attempt any sea-based invasion.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd be in trouble. So it depends to the extent to which how effective Ukrainian military capability is in
Odessa.
and around Odessa.
Yeah. The media is currently droning on about a Russian strike hitting a cathedral in Odessa.
Yeah, that was probably
That was today or this morning.
yeah, that was undoubtedly
Air defense.
Yes, either Ukrainian air defense, or I wouldn't put it past them to actually blow it up themselves, to in some way or other target it deliberately themselves. So either an accidental air defense, Ukrainian air defense, that incompetent or not well enough trained air defense personnel who ended up hitting the church. But I think it's very specific, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was attacked, because again, this is a propaganda information war, and it's has always been 50% that or more
Optics.
and it's very important. So as Russia attacks Odessa, and that's like a pretty significant blow to, and the grain deal being dropped, it's pretty significant blow to the Ukrainians and the Western backers. So
They make it look as barbaric as possible.
Let's make it look as bad as possible. That's just the mainstay, like everything Russia does, whatever way you can make it look brutal and barbaric, up to and including actually blowing up churches yourself and then saying, look, during the overnight missile strikes from Russia, because the idea that Russia would have targeted a church is just silly, like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Meanwhile, well, that's about all I have to say about the war in Ukraine. But I wanted to check in with how the copers are coping. So remember this guy Simon Tisdall, Tisdall, over the Guardian in London. Headline: Putin has become a global bogeyman. Russians must exorcise this ghoul. The byline: accursed, ostracized, but heedless of the misery he causes. This accused war criminal is dragging his people into a moral abyss.
That's is that in the opinion section? Or
Yes.
comment is free, yeah.
Oh,
That's an interesting opinion, you know, and it's just a moralistic opinion from a Western lefty, you know,
Nutter.
mind-programmed crazy person who can't see reality.
The meat of his article, I'll summarize for you. He actually is hoping that Xi of China is going to come to his senses and help the West rid the world of Putin. That's basically what it concludes.
That's just,
it's just the purest copium I've seen in a while.
But it's like
copium squared.
It's a shocking level of lack of basic knowledge about how the world works,
how things are going.
I mean, but that's just like, here's what I would like to see happen. I know it won't ever happen, but here's what, you know. I mean, why don't everybody start doing that? You know, I know. Now, I want to preface what I'm going to say here by saying that I know that what I'm going to say is complete fantasy and it'll never happen, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I expect you to read it. Why?
Because this will make you feel better about the situation.
It certainly made me feel better writing it, so...
Yeah, it's bonkers.
Arrest him.
Yeah, his concluding line is, will Xi do everyone a favor and help Russians exorcise the bogeyman? It's an intriguing, hopeful thought.
Yeah, intriguing and hopeful. Yeah. You know, I asked myself how I felt about this thought, and I told myself that it was intriguing and hopeful, and I felt a lot more hope as a result of it, and I want to share that hope with you.
Everyone has thoughts,
The hopium.
but he put it in writing, and then the Guardian editors put it on the fucking website. Like,
Well,
it's not all so black, though. We saw the CNN clip with Fareed interviewing Schmidt. The Telegraph has a more reality-based op-ed here from that Kemp guy. Kemp is ex-British soldier. Has been
actor.
Someone had a funny timeline of all his op-eds going back to March 2022, and they begin with flip-flopping, but it's overwhelmingly like, we got this, we're going to win, massive, Putin's screwed, and it softens and softens, and this is his most recent one. At least it's based somewhat in reality. Ukraine's counteroffensive is failing with no easy fixes. Well, as we just saw when we explained the basic facts of artillery warfare, it's impossible to win.
Yeah.
And your NATO heads know that. That's what makes them shitheads, because they're lying and they're throwing bodies at it. Because
What does he say the real source of the recent struggles are, if it's not air power? Artillery, not enough shells.
God, I can't remember.
It was that riveting that
No.
you can't remember.
It's actually kind of sick. He says the real issue is, does Ukraine have enough motivation
to slaughter more of its military?
to
Personnel.
really go for and penetrate these 1914 style defensive belts of tank traps, barbed wires, minefields, bunkers, and trench lines.
Mm-hmm.
So his copium is that they go with option number one, as explained by Schmidt, that they throw millions more people at the 60,000 artillery shells being fired at them daily.
They don't have millions more people.
Well, that's the question. McGregor suspects that the population is down to 20 million. Ukraine's population used to be 45 million. Obviously, not all of them were killed, but most of them left through economic migration and before the war, and now they fled as war refugees. But
most of them have sense and don't want to be fodder in a rich man's game.
yeah, they've taken to Western Europe, and they're Yeah, they're sitting it out.
Yep.
No, that's it. Basically, his hope is that more Ukrainians kill themselves. So that's all I got about them. The war in Ukraine.
That's all I have to say about the war in Vietnam.
Meanwhile, in America, Jesus Christ, that country is so embarrassing. Like the cringe coming out of the US. There are so many clips of it now, whether it's Kamala or Biden making some faux pas, something unintelligible, something absolutely creepy. I used to kind of jump on it and go, wow, I'll add that to the collection. And maybe I'll show people next week on the newsreel. Now it's just, the cringe is, I actually scroll past it. The cringe hits me and I'm not even willing to look at it.
Yep. Well, this. I mean, you mightn't read this into the headline, but it's there in the headline. There's two things about it. So Biden invites CIA boss to join his cabinet. The US president asked the CIA director, William Burns, to play a direct role in his government. Now, what you need to rewrite that headline, right? It's like the CIA has decided that Biden is too incompetent to run the country as commander-in-chief. So basically they have appointed the director of the CIA into the position of president, who will now directly take decisions rather than just sending Biden
the advice,
daily missives in what he should do, because that's not actually working very well, because the guy can't even read the documents properly and follow the instructions. So we have to basically put the CIA director effectively in the position of commander-in-chief in the White House and have him run the country, and just have Biden come out to fall down the stairs every now and again. The other thing is to contrast that with Trump in terms of the switch over. Like Trump basically got in trouble, and this was what we call Chuck Schumer, as we've played that clip a few times of him saying that the CIA had 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at Trump. This was pre, Mueller investigation, Russia collusion, blah, 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 blah. That was the 6 ways from Sunday that they went after Trump, and it's continuing to this day, as we'll talk about soon. But that was because Trump had dissed the CIA and told them that he didn't want their daily morning briefings.
Yeah.
Which is like, what do you mean, Mr. President? That's how you operate. The CIA,
That's how we tell you what to do.
The CIA tells you what to do, and then you do it. And it's like, no, I don't want to hear those anymore. I don't even want you guys to come in anymore. I'm not interested. I'm going to run it myself. And then he gets Mueller, he gets, Russia collusion and, blah, 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 and all the other stuff. Yeah. And then the massive switcheroo when Biden comes in, to the point now that Biden is basically has, the CIA director whispering in his ear, "No, Mr. President, say something. No, not that. No. All right, look.
In fact, just get down off the podium.
Yeah, let me get in there.
Well, the other little minor interesting thing about that is that the CIA director is not part of the government. The Biden government isn't welcoming in the CIA director to become part of the government. The CIA isn't officially part of the US government.
Well, he is now.
He is now. They've just made overt and official what?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But yeah, they've always run the country.
And just on the same kind of topic, I suppose, not on the same topic, but similar moves in that kind of totalitarian, rule by intel agency topic. The US creates permanent pandemic agency. The office will take, so the US government has launched a new agency to prepare for pandemics and other biological threats. With Joe Biden tapping a retired Air Force general to spearhead the project. It's going to be called the Office of Pandemic Preparedness and Response Policy. It'll be tasked with devising a response to public health crises, coordinating scientific research and medical efforts against pandemics, and providing regular reports to Congress. So basically, the CIA, intel agencies, there's, they've just taken over completely in the US. Unelected officials who are now overtly, they have been covertly for quite a long time, but now they're overtly running the US government and deciding the course on which the US will follow, will take. So that's, and obviously they're doing that with an eye to some future pandemic, so contrived or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nuts. Biden created another new agency this week. It just grows and grows and grows, you know. This one supposedly is to investigate and regulate AI.
Mm.
Okay. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah, on Trump, news this week is that Trump was the judge overseeing the court case against him. That is basically, I mean, it's amazing. It's just like a case that has no merit whatsoever. He kept some documents like every other president did, and maybe talked to some people about them, but didn't really. It didn't really reveal anything. But we're going to have a court case, and they've decided that the court case is going to be in. It's going to start in May next year. So right around the time when the primaries, the election or the selection or whatever for the presidential candidate for the Republican Party is going to be happening, and going to because it happens in advance when it's more or less known, and it's officially announced I think in June or July. Anyway, so right in the middle of that, Trump is going to be in court, and this court case is going to go on from May all throughout next summer, and probably right up until and through possibly the actual election in November. So this is obviously designed, like you've got a phony court case that has been now strategically timed to effectively try and take Trump out of the running, or out of the running for the Republican presidential nomination. So I think my prediction from a long time ago still is on the cards, where basically you're going to have a hung election where nobody gets 270 electoral college votes, and then all sorts of bullshit ensues after that. Because basically, I'm not saying this is exactly the way it's going to go, because I don't know, but one possibility is that because of this court case and Trump and the Republican Republican Party basically will decide that Trump is not a good option, because he's there's an ongoing court case against him. He's appearing in court on these charges. He's not a good option to pick. Therefore, that will go with DeSantis. But Trump says, fuck you, I'm going to run anyway as an independent. So Trump runs as an independent, and you have DeSantis as a nominee. You have Biden as a Democratic. It's going to happen probably. It's crazy, but there you go. Dollary old Joe is going to be the Democratic option for president again. And also at the same time, you'll have Robert RFK Jr., who will steal a lot of the Democratic votes. So you'll have the Republican vote split to whatever extent between Trump and DeSantis. You'll have the Democratic vote split between RFK, people who have a bit of sense, and most Democrats who don't, still voting for Biden. And that way nobody gets 270 electoral college votes, and you have a hung election. And nobody gets declared president. And then, like we mentioned previously, the next step is then it goes to Congress to try and figure out who should be president among those four. And it's probable that Congress won't be able to decide, like they need a over 50% or 51% majority, and Congress, you probably won't get that. Then Congress can't resolve who's going to be president. It goes to the Senate, who then picks the vice president from their running mates. Will that happen? I don't know. But even then, you only have a vice president, and it can go on for months and months and months, and go on for a long time, where you have no president running the country, which would be very fitting for America, because there's no point in having a president running America, because the intel agencies run America.
Run it with the new permanent
COVID. It would suit them perfectly well, actually.
COVID
it would be
pandemic.
perfect, because they would step in, and they would have much more control, much more overt control. If there was no president, they would have to step in and have basically not officially, but they would be able to have a stronger argument for taking more control over the whole situation when there's a constitutional crisis. Basically, there's no president. What are we going to do? Well, we've been working behind the scenes for a very long time. We know how it runs, basically. So let's.
Here's a pandemic. Oh, let's run things.
Yeah,
that's very elaborate. I like it, by the way. I'm not dissing it, but it's super elaborate. For me, it's more like, well, here's a counter control. It still is like trouble, but people will just accept whatever they're told. Whoever's won, the count will be done in a way that it's not sclerotic and unclear. There'll be something clear. It'll be unbelievable. Maybe it'll be Biden or maybe someone else. The only
There's no way
it won't be credible,
There's no way they're going to be able.
but they'll try it.
There's no way allowing for rigging of elections and rigging of votes. There's no way they're going to be able to credibly rig the votes with a four-way split.
For
president.
it's that big. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nobody's going to believe that Trump got, let's say it's between two contenders. Say they're rigging it and they want to do the usual, 48-52, 49-51 split, right? So you take that roughly 50% for Republican nominees. There's no way that anybody's going to believe that DeSantis got almost all of that 50%, or even that Trump got all of that 50%, and they don't want Trump in. So they're not going to give it to him. They're going to try. If they rig it, they'll have to try and give DeSantis, of the Republican vote, 99% of it, and Trump won, for him to actually have to be a Republican president. And on the other side, nobody, with the way the polling's going, nobody's going to believe that Joe Biden is going to get 99% of the Democratic vote with RFK as a.
If RFK goes independent, but if RFK does a Bernie Sanders and accepts the DNC's decision in June,
they don't want RFK.
Then they can easily. They gave Biden 81 million votes in 2020.
They're not. Yeah.
But in other words, he gets the 51% to whatever the split is between the two GOP candidates. So the other big if in there is that if it's split in both in June, if it splits both ways, if Trump says to hell with you, I go independent and RFK Jr., I don't think he will. I think he's too polite.
RFK's not getting the nomination.
For sure, we agree on that. But then the if is if he also does a Trump, is he enough of a rebel to
go independent?
To go independent.
I think he might, but it doesn't matter.
Because otherwise they'll just give another 81 million votes to Biden and he wins.
But they can't. Because it's a three-way split even without RFK. It's electoral college votes, remember. There's 270 electoral college votes.
But if he gets enough EC votes, Biden, assuming it's Biden, the split is still only over on the GOP side. In 1996, there was a three-way race, and I think Ross Perot got a third of votes, but it was still handsomely won re-election by the Democratic candidate, which was Bill Clinton running again. The Republicans were split 50-50, and Ross Perot, he made it huge, like incredible. It was the first time ever.
So he was a candidate, Ross Perot.
He was a candidate. Did he run independently? I think so. Anyway, that's what I'm saying. The big if is that RFK has to,
I don't know,
politely accept the DNC's decision, even though it would have been him as a favorite.
Yeah.
And then do something ultra rebellious.
Yeah.
And it's only recently he's gotten woke too.
I think the problem is it's unknown, but it's basically what I'm saying is that when you have two candidates, Democrat and Republican, people fall into one side or the other.
Yeah.
When you have three, you don't just split the Republican vote. You take away Democrat votes as well. Okay, you can allow for rigging, like you say, and just try and convince everybody that all Democrats voted for Biden. But if it's only Biden, I think, maybe they did it last time, but it's like it would strain credulity that's
what I think is a lot more the likely outcome. Credulity will be strained beyond some point that may not express itself in actual political snafu. But just that, here's the outcome. There's a new president, and the credulity is strained.
Yeah.
But life still goes on in Washington, but it has gone beyond the point of. But it already did. It'll just be what I'm arguing for is that a worsening of the situation we had socially after 2020.
Yeah.
Credulity was strained.
Yeah. At the very least, there's going to be some kind of major farce.
Yeah.
Around the 2024 presidential elections in the US. It's going to be a farcical, and it's going to break down in some way or other.
Yeah.
The democratic process will be broken.
It is
next year
by this
but officially
of this trial, Trump.
Yeah. Well, no, but I mean, actually seen to be officially broken. It'll break down in one way or another. There'll be something that will make it impossible for the normal election of a president to actually happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it'll be recognised by a lot of people. It won't be just like people like Trump are saying you stole the election. It'll be the whole country will recognise that this is a shit show. This is a joke. There's something wrong here. That's what I think anyway. It's just my crystal ball.
Well, in parallel with this, the other trend that has continued all summer long is the heat on Hunter Biden and therefore by proxy, Joe Biden.
Yeah, for sure.
This week, Marjorie Taylor Greene was holding up giant photos of snips from some of his videos. She had to be censured on the floor, but still, like, it's pouring out of every door an opportunity that the Republicans are putting this intense pressure, and they're getting some help. I find this interesting. Have a look at this. This is evidence of a hidden hand in this process. You remember in the Epstein affair, the Daily Mail and its sister organization in New York, the New York Daily Post, I think, would publish really damaging evidence, some of it dating back 10 years, of people turning up to Epstein's mansion. Bill Gates got ousted that way. Bill Gates, the former Prime Minister of Israel, and others. So the Daily Mail has this exclusive. So what this means is they're putting reporters, they're trailing Hunter Biden. And this is hilarious because Biden was in LA last week to see his lawyer. And the Daily Mail had some info on that, and they were positioned outside to take a photo. Scroll down. Of while Hunter Biden was inside the building, his lawyer pops out onto the balcony to take a hit from a bong.
Yep.
And now that kind of thing is going on as well. There's a hand fueling the issues, you know, or maybe, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Like it's gonna.
I think it's having an effect already, and that's why I think Biden is going to be, you know, you'll have to seriously rig the Biden vote if you want him to win outright, because more and more Democrats, as time progresses over the next year, and more stuff comes out about Biden and his criminality and his son and all that kind of stuff, more and more Democrats would have to seriously hold their nose before voting for him. You know what I mean? So there's so many different aspects to it that are developing that just say to me that the whole thing is going to descend into a complete shit show. And someone in the chat there just said that RFK can't run for president once he's declared as an independent and then doesn't get the nomination. But he hasn't actually declared as an independent yet, or hasn't declared as Democrat. He hasn't declared that he's running as Democrat yet, has he? He's declared that he's running, but he hasn't actually signalled that he's...
I think he has. He's filed. He has filed to run as a Democrat. Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Files for paperwork. Okay, that was to run for president. Okay, files for paperwork. That was in April. No, it's just that there's people still saying that he should run as an independent. So I suppose he can change his mind between now and then.
People are seeing what they want to see. They want him and Trump to team up and stuff like that because they're so close in so many issues.
But I wonder if there's a possibility that he can actually back out of that between now and then, you know. We can withdraw his filing as Democrat. Who knows? Anyway, we don't know.
It'll be a shit show, one way or the other. The last thing I want to comment on is the hysteria about the weather. This was specific to Europe last week, I think, but I'm sure Americans got a daily barrage of this stuff too. The following graphic shows some of the forecasts versus actual high temperatures in the Mediterranean last week. There you see 40 around Barcelona. It was actually 34. 40 in northern Italy, it was actually 37 and so on. And you're like, okay, so they got it wrong, but why? Why was it so wrong? there's a blog people probably know about, especially skeptics of the science on climate. What's up with that? They published, well, they cited, in fact, a European Space Agency report that clarified why they, quote, got it wrong. Basically, it appears that when they were issuing their reports that the media picked up and they painted Europe purple and red and white and dark and, you know, on fire, that the ESA was giving them data based on satellite readings of the land temperature. That is how hot the surface of the planet itself is, the ground below your feet.
Rather than the air temperature.
You're supposed to give the 2-meter air temperature readings. And based on their readings, they had forecasted something that was farcical. Of course, it's 50 degrees if you put your hand on the bonnet of your car or something on the ground. But that's not how we do it. It's never been, and everyone knows that. So they issued a follow-up in which they clarified that. But by then, it had gone around the world. The journalists never checked or anything. 47, 48 predicted in Sicily and stuff. And the actual temperature was maybe 40. A normal July week in the Mediterranean. And they issued a follow-up, but the media never gave the follow-up from the European Space Agency. That's just kind of hysteria that's going on. Part of what's really super, super annoying about this is that there are real things that are worth noting. So these marine heat waves are a real thing. In this case, the data is from buoys out in the oceans that have been transmitting data for decades in some cases, or there are new fleets of them. But it's always done the same way. It's surface temperature from buoys actually recording rather than satellites, you know, data being put into models and stuff. So the marine heat waves are legit. I think there's probably seen some of the graphs people are sharing, like the temperatures in some places are 5C and higher above the norm, and that the marine temperature readouts for the North Atlantic, say, are on track to be the highest ever in absolute terms this year. There's usually a small variation, but this year is way over. It will be the highest line you see peaking in early August. And then, of course, there's the fact that extreme weather is happening. They had people's attention on Italy because record hottest day forecast ever, and it didn't happen by 10 degrees. But it's weird. They've got your attention to focus on that part of the world, but then they just left out the fact that a tornado touched down in Milan city center during massive storms that also turned streets into frozen rivers of hail. That got some reporting, but nowhere near. What they want you to see is the heat. Interminable heat that will just keep going and going, climate change. But they kind of ignore the actual extreme weather because they
don't link it. Yeah.
They don't link it, though.
Although they do, and technically in all the documentation they do say that, you know, global warming, man-made global warming will lead to more chaotic and erratic weather, including tornadoes, hurricanes, blah, 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 blah. I mean, in the official documentation they say that, but they don't. They focus on one thing just because they think people are simpletons, basically, and they just want to scare them into, you know, with the most dramatic story, which is like you're cooking, you're going to bake, you're going to burn, you know what I mean? I mean, there aren't tornadoes everywhere, so therefore, you know, no point in talking about that. But heat is everywhere, supposedly. So, you know, that's what we need to do. You know, just talk about the heat. So, yeah, but again, it's like we've talked about before. It's undoubtedly stuff going on, you know, in terms of the marine heat waves, are to do with probably to do with undersea, seafloor changes. You know, when you get into that level of detail, you have to start questioning whether or not human beings can be, you know, responsible for an increase in undersea volcanoes erupting and that kind of stuff, you know. Of course, they'd say that, yes, that is the case. Global warming, man-made global warming causes all of this. Everything that goes wrong with the climate is always to do with man-made global warming. But it's like, yeah, whatever.
There was a massive die-off of penguins last week. They washed up dead on a beach in Uruguay. That's the kind of thing that they don't link properly. They tell people,
were boiled.
It's possible. It was possible it was an undersea eruption. There's some localized event that caused it, an outgassing that knocked them out and they washed up, or a hot plume from an eruption or something like that. But when it's reported, it's like, oh God, look, we've done the poor penguins.
We heated them.
No. The population of this specific breed of penguin has exploded. It's bigger than it's ever been. The Antarctic's freaking crammed with them, and so is South America. But there was an actual die-off localized, and that does mean something. But it's the hysteria is just wrapping it all up wrong for people, you know.
Yeah, there was this event in don't know about Earth Changes. I don't know if it's linked or not, but there was this event in Johannesburg last week. Just expand that video so we can get a good look at it. Well, I mean, play it. Can you expand it? Play it and expand it? No expanding. Okay, boom. Check that out. That was in the street in Johannesburg. The whole street, if you look like in the background, the whole thing all the way along, straight up, more or less simultaneously. Boom. So,
nuts.
The local gas company said it was unlikely to be a gas explosion, a gas leak, and a gas explosion would tend to be more violent than that. It looks more like, it wasn't an ignited gas. It wasn't like, there was no fire. It seemed to be some kind of a rupture of something, and along a line. You know what I mean? Along in a straight line. It looks like there was undoubtedly some kind of a channel or a pipe or something. Whether it was man-made
might have been
or
the
natural.
gas pipe, but
but not
the gas rupturing per se, not the natural gas that is piped there, but
something rupturing the pipe and then just causing the pressure from the gas, not igniting, but just raising the street up in that way. Really weird.
There was a headline. I almost retweeted it until I realized it was fake. I was better be careful there. It was actually the Irish Independent. Somebody had tweaked the headline to say something like, ahead of upcoming hottest heat wave ever in Europe, the Ireland's COVID expert, Luke O'Neill, remember him? He was like our Neil Ferguson, recommends implementing lockdowns.
Right.
In Ireland. It was like, it was a giveaway. I thought that's obviously silly because it would never get that hot that you'd need to do something drastic. Well, that was 36 hours ago. And the guy who retweeted it has since taken it down himself. So it was fake news. It was funny. It was satire, right? That's all it was. It was just a laugh. Well, have a look at this. 36 hours later, Telegraph. This is not fake. This is a real article. Rome hits 41.8 C temperature record, which, as we just saw, is probably debatable as to whether that's ground or air, as COVID-style protocols rolled out for heat wave. And if you go to the first paragraph, Rome was among several European regions to breach temperature records on Tuesday. It wasn't, but whatever. As COVID-style protocols were rolled out across Italy to protect its hospitals from the unprecedented heat wave. It wasn't unprecedented. It was normal. It didn't reach that hot.
But everybody likes a bit of a COVID-style protocol, right? We all enjoyed them so much at the time.
We have to protect,
Yeah.
What was the thing? The first mantra they wrote
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
2 weeks to flatten the curve.
2 weeks.
Protect the hospitals.
2 weeks to cool down the temperature.
So it was satire, obviously, but then it's not. You have people out there who are not kidding.
Yeah,
they're serious.
There's Ryan. I have to look it up, but I was under the impression that that's the case. Ryan says that if RFK Jr. were to lose the Democratic primary, he does have the option to register then as an independent candidate. So I'll check that out and confirm it. I always thought that was the case, but since people are debating it, I'll check it out and we'll get a definitive answer on it. But that's that's my pet theory for like over a year now, and the band's going to make it. I'm sticking with it. I'm going to be praying to all the gods.
But you see, I have to hedge. If it fails, I can't be associated.
Exactly, you can't be associated with me. You'll have to disavow me.
I need to have a mundane control theory.
You have to be on record.
It's still snafu, but
yeah. We'll see. It's a relatively long way off anyway. So
Parting item from me. You said when it was an issue, blew up a bit as an issue, the whole UFO disclosure thing in June, because of the whistleblower called Grush, who came forward and said, I've seen loads of stuff, coupled with the strange incident in Las Vegas being reported at the same time, but which actually happened back in May. Anyway, that did elevate UFOs, or UAPs now, to international media attention. And you said the tell of that would be what happens politically, because there were congressmen saying they were calling for investigations. Where would they go with that? Well, there was a development this week, not widely reported, but it's in the Hill here. Headline, Non-Human Intelligence, Chuck Schumer, arguably the most powerful Democrat senator, proposes stunning new UFO legislation.
legislation.
I know, like, no aliens allowed here. Well, actually, no, unless you're LBGT. No, I'm kidding.
Extraordinary legislation on July 13th suggesting that the US government and private contractors may secretly possess recovered UFOs and biological evidence of living.
The key paragraph.
Non-human intelligence. So what's he saying? What does the law say?
The key paragraph is, if you do a word search for "to that end," down there. To that end, Schumer's legislation establishes an independent 9-member agency, again, creating more freaking government agencies, to collect, review, and declassify UAP records. If passed in its current form, the law would mandate that all government UFO documents, quote, carry a presumption of immediate public disclosure.
Well, there you go. That's setting it up for sure. Except setting up a limited hangout.
A limited hangout, because of course they won't reveal everything they know, but still, that's...
Well,
it's ticking along in official Washington.
Well, unless John Kirby says it's not true, and here he is, White House spokesman, formerly of the Pentagon, no? Anyway,
he was State Department.
Sorry. Now he's White House spokesperson, and here, Security Council spokesman John Kirby. Go ahead.
And coordinate the way these sightings are reported. If we didn't take it seriously, of course we do. I mean, some of these phenomena we know have already had an impact on our training ranges. For when pilots are out trying to do training in the air, and they see these things, they're not sure what they are, and it can have an impact on their ability to perfect their skills. So it already had an impact here, and we just want to better understand it. Now, we're not saying what they are or what they're not. We're saying that there's something our pilots are seeing. We're saying it has had an effect on some of our training operations, and so we want to get to the bottom of it. We want to understand it better. So, yes.
Do you believe these whistleblowers that have come forward?
Yes.
I'm not going to talk about individual whistleblowers.
I'm not going to talk about specifics. I'm just saying.
So what you're saying is aliens.
Well, I'm saying aliens, and I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to say no, but I'm saying aliens. I'm saying at our training bases. I'm saying these aliens have had an effect on our pilots and our aircraft and our ability to perform their functions. We don't know what they are.
I'm not saying what they're not.
I'm not saying what they are. I'm not saying what they're not. I'm not even saying what they might be. I'm not saying not what they might be, but I'm saying aliens. So I hope you got something from that. Anyway.
Do you have a joke to close out this week?
That was the joke.
That was a joke.
Oh, a joke. I need a joke. Well, that would have to, that would be a lot of pressure on me to come up with a good weekly joke, Neil.
Come
Not
on.
that many good jokes anymore.
Just talking about the news is a joke. It's all a joke.
Yeah. It has to be a topical joke, though. It can't just be any old joke. It has to be a topical one.
Okay. Well, I won't say mine then.
No.
All right, on that note, thanks
Next
for watching.
week. Yeah.
The commenter says the maximum official temperature ever recorded by any weather station in Rome, Italy, was 42 C in July 1841.
1841. Yep.
Probably. Still, if it was 42.5, those heat maps are trying to tell you the roads are melting in Europe. They're not.
And they're not. Yeah. We can't trust the government on anything except for aliens. So, 2 aliens walk into a war.
Yeah. What happens?
barman says,
Name your poison.
two aliens walk into a bar with a lion.
Okay. What does the lion want?
Nothing. And they proceed to get drunk, including the lion. And then the aliens get up and walk out. And the barman says, hey, are you going to leave that lion there? Anyway,
Terrible.
you see, if I don't script them, they're terrible. Actually, and it's meant to be a giraffe anyway, so we got it totally wrong. Anyway, yeah. So on that horrible note, we're going to leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for listening, watching, commenting. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with another show. So until then, have a good week. See ya.
See you next time. Bye bye.
Can't stop the signal now.